The smell of coffee and burnt toast filled our kitchen that Tuesday morning when I accidentally knocked Dad's wallet off the counter. Credit cards scattered across the linoleum like fallen dominoes, and as I scrambled to collect them, a photograph slipped from behind his driver's license. Not unusual, right? Dads carry family photos, except this wasn't us. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if the story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The woman in the picture had kind eyes and auburn hair pulled back in a messy bun. She held a little girl, maybe 4 years old, with the same dimpled chin my father had. They stood in front of a Victorian house painted sage green with white trim, both smiling at whoever held the camera. The little girl wore a yellow sundress with tiny sunflowers, and something about her laugh lines made my chest tighten. I'd never seen this woman or this child before in my life. Yet there they were, tucked away in the most private space my father owned, right next to our family photo from last Christmas. My hands shook as I turned the picture over. Written in careful cursive were the words, Lily and Sophie, summer 2018. Portland. The handwriting wasn't Dad's chicken scratch. It was feminine, deliberate, the kind of penmanship they don't teach anymore. Dad walked into the kitchen just as I was sliding everything back into his wallet, pretending I hadn't seen anything. He grabbed his coffee, kissed the top of my head, and said he'd be late from work because of a client meeting. Normal Tuesday. Normal Dad. Normal lie, apparently. That photo haunted me for 3 weeks. I caught myself staring at Dad during dinner, searching his face for secrets I'd never noticed. The way he'd pause mid-sentence sometimes, like he was editing himself. How he always kept his phone face down on the table. The fact that he'd never talked about his life before he met Mom, always deflecting with jokes about being boring. Mom had been gone for 2 years now, cancer taking her piece by piece, until there was nothing left but memories and the overwhelming quiet of a house built for 3 people. Dad and I had grown closer in her absence, or so I thought. We cooked together, watched old movies, talked about everything from my college plans to his work stress. But apparently we didn't talk about everything. I tried to convince myself there was an innocent explanation. Maybe Lily was a colleague's wife and Sophie was their daughter. Maybe Dad was just being kind, keeping their photos safe after some office tragedy. Maybe I was overthinking everything because grief had a way of making you paranoid about losing the people you had left. But the date kept bothering me. Summer 2018. Mom was already sick then, already fading. We'd spent that summer driving to specialist appointments and researching experimental treatments. Dad had been my rock, never missing a doctor's visit, always optimistic, even when the oncologist expression told us everything we needed to know. Yet somewhere during those hellish months, he'd been in Portland with a woman named Lily and a little girl named Sophie, happy enough to take pictures in front of a sage green house I'd never seen. The breaking point came on a Saturday afternoon when Dad fell asleep on the couch, his wallet half hanging from his back pocket. I told myself I just needed to see the photo again to prove I'd imagined the whole thing. But when I carefully extracted his wallet and opened it, my heart stopped. There were 2 photos now. The new one showed the same little girl, Sophie, but older. Maybe 6 years old, missing her front teeth in a grin that could power a small city. She wore a school uniform with a plaid skirt and navy cardigan, and behind her stood what looked like classroom decorations, Halloween-themed, with paper pumpkins and construction paper leaves taped to bulletin boards. This photo was dated just 3 months ago. My father had been visiting this child regularly, recently. While I thought we were processing grief together, while I believed I was the center of his world, he'd been living an entirely separate life with people who clearly meant enough to him that he risked carrying their photos every day. I photographed both pictures with my phone before carefully replacing them, my hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped his wallet twice. Dad stirred on the couch, and I rushed to the kitchen, busying myself with dishes that didn't need washing. That evening, he made his famous spaghetti carbonara, the recipe he'd learned from his Italian grandmother, or so he'd always claimed. We ate in comfortable silence, the television playing some mindless cooking show. Everything felt normal, except for the storm brewing in my chest. "Dad," I said, testing the waters, "do you ever think about traveling? Maybe Portland? I heard it's beautiful in the fall." His fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Portland's nice. Why do you ask?" "Just wondering. You never talk about places you've been." He resumed eating, but I caught the slight tension in his shoulders. "I'm not much of a traveler, sweetheart. You know that." But I didn't know that. I didn't know anything, apparently. The next morning, I did something I'd never done before. I went through Dad's things. Not violently, not destructively, but methodically. I started with his dresser, carefully lifting folded t-shirts and checking beneath his sock drawer. Nothing unusual there, just the normal detritus of a middle-aged man's life. His closet yielded more interesting results. In the back, behind his winter coats, I found a small duffel bag I'd never seen before. Inside were travel-sized toiletries, a change of clothes, and a key ring with 3 keys I didn't recognize. One looked like a house key, brass and recently cut. Another was smaller, possibly for a mailbox or storage unit. The third was plastic, the kind hotels used for electronic locks. More disturbing was what I found in his home office. Dad was meticulous about his work papers, everything filed and organized with the precision of someone who'd spent decades in accounting. But tucked inside his tax folder from 2018 was a receipt from a Portland hotel, the Haithman, a 5-night stay in July, right in the middle of Mom's worst month of chemo. I sat in his desk chair staring at the receipt, trying to make sense of it. He told us he was going to a work conference in Seattle that week. Mom had been so disappointed because she had a rare good day and wanted to go see a movie together. I'd stayed with her instead, watching her fall asleep halfway through a romantic comedy she'd chosen specifically because it was supposed to be uplifting. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Jessica asking if I wanted to grab lunch, but I couldn't move. The pieces were forming a picture I didn't want to see, but couldn't ignore. I opened Dad's laptop knowing his password because he'd never hidden it from me. His browser history was clean, probably automatically deleted, but his email told a different story. Mixed in with work correspondence and spam were messages from someone named L. Morrison. The preview lines were mundane enough, like, "Thanks for last weekend. Sophie loved the zoo. Call when you can." But they painted a clear picture of regular communication with someone who had access to a child named Sophie. The most recent email was from 2 days ago. "She's asking when Uncle Thomas is coming back. I told her soon. Let me know about Thanksgiving." Uncle Thomas. My father's name was Thomas, but I'd never heard him call that except for his own mother, who had died when I was 12. Mom had always called him Tom or Tommy when she was being playful. I called him Dad. The mailman called him Mr. Chen because that was the name on our mailbox, the name I'd grown up with, the name on my birth certificate. But someone in Portland knew him as Uncle Thomas, and they were expecting him for Thanksgiving, a holiday that was 3 weeks away, a holiday I had assumed we'd spent together like we had for the past 2 years since Mom died. I closed the laptop and sat in the growing darkness of his office, pieces of my life rearranging themselves like a jigsaw puzzle someone had been working on in secret. Everything I'd believed about my family, about my father, about the quiet life we'd built together, was apparently incomplete. The front door opened, and Dad's voice called out, "Mia, I brought Chinese takeout." Mia. He'd named me after his grandmother, he'd always said, a woman who'd immigrated from Italy and made the best carbonara in Brooklyn, a woman whose recipe had been passed down through generations of our family. But now I wondered if any of that was true, if Mia was even my real name, or just another story in a life that was apparently full of them. I heard him moving around the kitchen, probably setting out containers of lo mein and sweet and sour pork,
probably wondering why I wasn't rushing downstairs like I always did when he brought home my favorite sesame chicken. Instead, I sat in his chair, holding a hotel receipt from Portland, trying to figure out how to ask my father who he really was without destroying what was left of our family. Because despite everything, despite the photos and the lies and the secret trips, he was still my dad. He'd still been there for every scraped knee, every heartache, every triumph. He'd still held me when Mom died, still made pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse on Sunday mornings, still remembered exactly how I liked my coffee. But Uncle Thomas was a stranger who visited Portland and made a little girl smile and kept photos of people I'd never met in the wallet that also held my school picture. I finally went downstairs, plastering on a smile that felt like wearing someone else's.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He handed me chopsticks and smiled, the same smile I'd seen in countless photos over the years, the same smile that had comforted me through childhood fears and teenage drama and the long nights when Mom's breathing got so shallow we weren't sure she'd see morning. But now I noticed things I'd never seen before. The way his smile didn't quite reach his eyes when he talked about work. How he always seemed to be listening for something, like he was expecting a phone call he didn't want me to hear. The careful way he chose his words, as if he was translating from another language before he spoke. We ate in relative silence, the television providing background noise that filled the spaces where conversation should have been. Dad asked about my classes, and I gave him the usual updates about professors and assignments and campus drama. Normal daughter things to discuss with a normal father. Except I kept thinking about that little girl, Sophie, and her gap-toothed grin in a classroom full of Halloween decorations. Kept wondering if Dad asked her about school too, if he knew her favorite subjects and whether she struggled with math like I had at her age. After dinner, Dad loaded the dishwasher while I put away the leftover containers, our usual routine. He hummed something under his breath, an old song I didn't recognize, and for a moment everything felt exactly as it should. Father and daughter, cleaning up after a shared meal, comfortable in each other's presence. Then his phone buzzed on the counter, and I saw the caller ID flash L. Morrison before he quickly declined the call. "Telemarketer," he said, not meeting my eyes. But I'd seen him answer calls from telemarketers before, usually to politely tell them he wasn't interested. He'd never declined a call that quickly unless he didn't want me to overhear the conversation. Later that night, I lay in bed listening to the familiar sounds of our house settling for the evening. Dad's footsteps in the hallway, the bathroom faucet running, his bedroom door closing. Everything normal except for the fact that I was now hyper-aware of every sound, wondering if he was making phone calls he didn't want me to hear. At some point, I must have fallen asleep because I woke to the sound of Dad's voice drifting up from the kitchen. Soft, careful, the way people talked when they were trying not to wake someone else in the house. I crept to my bedroom door and opened it just enough to hear fragments of conversation. I know. Soon. Can't just. Needs time. Tell her I miss her too. My heart hammered against my ribs. He was talking to someone about missing a her, and this definitely wasn't about Mom. This was present tense, active, ongoing. The conversation ended, and I heard him moving around downstairs for a few more minutes before everything went quiet. I waited until his bedroom door closed again before allowing myself to breathe normally. The next few days passed in a strange sort of suspended animation. I went through the motions of normal life, attending classes, studying, having dinner with Dad, but everything felt like I was watching it happen to someone else. I caught myself studying his face during our conversations, looking for tells, for signs of deception, for clues about who he really was. The breakthrough came when I was doing laundry and found a business card in the pocket of his jeans. Morrison Family Photography, Portland, Oregon, capturing life's precious moments. There was a website listed and a phone number that started with the same area code I'd seen in his recent calls. I waited until Dad left for work the next morning, then immediately opened my laptop and navigated to the photographer's website. The homepage featured a slideshow of family portraits, wedding photos, and children's pictures, all beautifully composed with natural lighting and genuine smiles. But it was the About Us page that made my world tilt sideways. Hi, I'm Lily Morrison, and I've been capturing Portland families for over 8 years. After moving here from San Francisco with my daughter Sophie, I discovered my passion for preserving the moments that matter most. Whether it's a new baby's first smile, a child's graduation, or a family reunion, I believe every story deserves to be told through beautiful, authentic photography. There was a photo of her with the description, "the same woman from Dad's wallet pictures," but this time in professional attire with a camera around her neck. Her bio mentioned that she was a single mother who specialized in non-traditional family portraits and had a particular gift for helping families navigate complex dynamics with sensitivity and care. Non-traditional families. Complex dynamics. The words felt loaded with meaning I was afraid to understand. I scrolled through her portfolio and my breath caught. Mixed in with the typical family photos were pictures that seemed to tell different stories. A father with 2 separate families, photographed on different days, but with the same love in his eyes. Children who shared features with adults they weren't pictured with. Portraits that felt like pieces of larger puzzles. And then I found them. Photos of Dad. Not recent ones, but scattered throughout several years of portfolio work. Dad with Sophie at a playground, both of them laughing as she went down a slide. Dad teaching her to ride a bike in what looked like the same neighborhood as the sage green house. Dad at what appeared to be a school play applauding from the audience while Sophie took a bow in a costume that was too big for her. The photos were professional quality, clearly part of Lily's portfolio, but they told the story of a relationship that had been developing for years. Dad wasn't just visiting Portland occasionally, he was part of Sophie's life in meaningful, ongoing ways. I screenshotted everything, my fingers shaking as I tried to document the evidence of my father's secret existence. The photos painted a picture of a man who was present for milestones, who showed up for the big moments and the small ones, who had clearly earned a place of importance in this child's life. The last photo in the series was the most recent, dated just 6 weeks ago. Dad and Sophie at what looked like a science fair, both of them beaming at a volcano model that was undoubtedly hers. The caption read, "So proud of our budding scientist. Some of the best families are built with intention rather than accident." Built with intention. The phrase echoed in my head as I closed the laptop and tried to process what I'd learned. Everything about my relationship with Dad felt like accidental now, like I was the unplanned variable in a life he'd carefully constructed elsewhere. My phone rang, startling me out of my spiral. It was Jessica, probably wondering why I'd been avoiding her calls for the past few days. "Hey girl, what's up? You've been MIA lately." I almost hung up. How could I explain that I was in the middle of discovering that my entire life might be a lie? That the father I thought I knew was apparently living a double life with a photographer and her daughter in Portland? "I'm okay," I said, which was the opposite of true. "Just dealing with some family stuff." "Want to talk about it? I'm free all afternoon." Part of me wanted to spill everything, to have someone else help me make sense of what I'd found. But another part of me was terrified that speaking it out loud would make it real in a way I wasn't ready to handle. "Maybe later," I said. "I'm still figuring things out." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of our living room surrounded by photos of my own family. Me as a baby in Mom's arms, Dad teaching me to swim at the community pool, all of us at Disney World when I was 10. Matching t-shirts and sunburned noses. Christmas mornings and birthday parties and ordinary Tuesday afternoons that had seemed significant enough to preserve. Were those moments real, or was I always the obligation family while Portland held his chosen family? The front door opened, and Dad called out his usual greeting. I quickly closed my laptop and tried to arrange my face into something resembling normal. "How was school?" he asked, settling onto the couch beside me with a tired sigh. "Fine," I said, then took a breath and decided to test the waters. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. What's on your mind?" "Do you ever think about having more kids or, wish you had more family around?" The question hung between us, and I watched his face carefully for any tells. He was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was careful. "I have you," he said. "That's all the family I need." But his eyes shifted away from mine when he said it, and I caught the slight pause before he answered. "Another lie. gentle and well-intentioned, but still a lie. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I created a fake social media account and sent a message to Lily Morrison's photography page. Hi, I'm moving to Portland soon and looking for a family photographer. I saw your work online and love your style, especially your photos with children. Do you have any availability in the next month for a consultation? I hit send before I could change my mind, then spent the next hour staring at my phone waiting for a response that might give me more pieces to this puzzle. Her reply came faster than I expected. Hi there, thanks for reaching out. I'd love to chat about what you're looking for. Are you familiar with Portland at all, or would this be your first time here? I specialize in helping families navigate new situations and would be happy to discuss your specific needs.
When would be good for a phone call? New situations. There was that loaded language again, like she was speaking in code about circumstances that couldn't be discussed directly. I typed back, I'm not familiar with Portland at all, actually. This would be completely new for me. I'm particularly interested in your work with non-traditional families. When you have time for a call, I'm pretty flexible. Her response was almost immediate. Perfect. I have a lot of experience with unique family dynamics. How about tomorrow evening, around 7 p.m. your time? Also, just curious, how did you find my work? Most of my non-traditional family clients come through word of mouth. My heart rate spiked. This felt like a test, like she was trying to figure out if I was legitimate or if there was something else going on. A friend recommended you, I typed, which was technically true if I considered my father a friend. Said you were great at handling complex situations with sensitivity. Wonderful. I'll call you tomorrow at 7. Looking forward to chatting. I stared at my phone, realizing I just committed to a phone call with the woman who might hold all the answers about my father's secret life. In less than 24 hours, I'd either get clarity or make everything infinitely more complicated. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of nervous energy. Dad made dinner and we talked about my classes and his work, the same comfortable routine we'd developed over the past 2 years. But now every interaction felt like I was watching him perform, wondering if this version of himself was as carefully constructed as whatever persona he presented to Sophie and Lily. At one point, his phone buzzed with a text, and I caught a glimpse of the preview. Sophie's school play is next Friday at 7. Hope you can make it. He deleted the message without opening it fully, but not before I saw him smile, a different kind of smile than he used with me. Softer, somehow, more unguarded. Everything okay? I asked. Just work stuff, he said, slipping his phone into his pocket. Nothing important. But Sophie's school play felt important. Important enough that someone expected him to be there. Important enough that it made him smile in a way I hadn't seen since before Mom got sick. That night, I lay awake running through scenarios for the next day's phone call. What would I say? How much should I reveal? What if Lily recognized my voice somehow, or figured out who I was based on questions I asked? More terrifyingly, what if she told me things about my father that I didn't want to know? What if there were more secrets, deeper deceptions, other lives he was living that I couldn't even imagine? But the alternative, continuing to live in ignorance while my father maintained his careful performance, felt worse than whatever truth I might uncover. At 7 p.m. the next evening, my phone rang with a Portland area code. I'd spent the day rehearsing what I would say, but when I answered, my voice came out smaller than I had intended. Hello? Hi there. This is Lily Morrison. Is this a good time to chat about your photography needs? Yes, perfect timing, I said, settling into my desk chair with a notebook full of questions I'd prepared. Thanks for calling. Of course. So tell me a bit about your situation. You mentioned you're moving to Portland and looking for a family photographer. What kind of session were you thinking about? This was it. The moment where I either committed to the lie or found a way to get honest answers. Well, I said carefully, it's a bit complicated. I'm trying to understand some family dynamics that are new to me. I saw on your website that you specialize in non-traditional families, and I was hoping you might have some insight. There was a pause, and when she spoke again, her tone had shifted slightly, more cautious, more professional.
Can you tell me a bit more about what you mean by complicated? I work with all kinds of family structures: blended families, adoptive families, families with unique custody arrangements. What specifically are you navigating? My heart pounded as I decided to wade deeper into dangerous territory. What would you do if you discovered a family member was living a completely different life than what you thought? Like if they had relationships and commitments you never knew about? Another pause, longer this time. That's a very specific question, Lily said slowly. Are you actually looking for photography services, or is there something else you need help with? I could hear the shift in her voice, the way someone sounded when a conversation wasn't what they expected. I had two choices: back down and pretend I was just asking hypothetical questions, or dive in completely and see what happened. I think my father has been visiting Portland regularly. I found photos of him with a little girl named Sophie, and I think you might know you. The silence stretched so long I thought she had hung up. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. What's your father's name? Thomas Chen, but I think you might know him as Thomas something else. Oh my God. The professional composure cracked completely. You're Mia. The fact that she knew my name hit me like a physical blow. Not only did Lily know my father, but she knew about me. He'd talked about me enough that she recognized who I was from a single phone call. How do you know my name? I asked. Thomas talks about you all the time, she said, and now her voice was gentle. Careful, like she was talking to someone who might break. Sophie, she's been asking about you for years. She calls you her sister. Sister. The word reverberated through my chest like a bell being struck. I don't understand. Who is Sophie? How long has my father been part of her life? Lily was quiet for so long I thought the call had dropped. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. Mia, I think there are some things your father should tell you himself. But Sophie is his daughter, your half-sister, and he's been part of her life since the day she was born. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto my desk. Sophie was his daughter, my half-sister. The little girl with the gap-toothed smile and yellow sundress wasn't some random child Dad occasionally visited. She was family, real family that I'd never been told about. I scrambled to pick up the phone, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped it again. Lily? Are you still there? I'm here, she said softly. Mia, I'm so sorry. This isn't how you should have found out. How long? My voice came out as a croak. How long has he been lying to me? It's complicated. Thomas never lied about loving you. Everything he's told you about that is true. But yes, Sophie has been part of his life for 7 years now. 7 years. Sophie was around 6 in the most recent photo, which meant Dad had been living this double existence since she was born, since before Mom got sick, since Mom was still healthy and we were still a complete family. Or so I thought. Does she know about me? I asked. She does. She's always known she had a big sister named Mia who lived far away with her daddy. She's been begging to meet you for years. The casual way Lily said their daddy made me want to throw up. This wasn't some affair or secret relationship. This was a parallel family structure that had been operating alongside mine for nearly a decade. Why? I whispered. Why didn't he tell me? Lily sighed deeply. That's really something Thomas needs to explain. But Mia, I want you to know that he never intended to hurt you. Everything he's done, he thought he was protecting you. Protecting me from what? From knowing I had a sister? From knowing he had another life? From losing what you had with him. Your mother was sick for so long, and you needed him to be completely present for that. He didn't want to complicate your grief or make you feel like you had to share him when you were already losing her. The explanation felt reasonable and infuriating at the same time. How dare he decide what I could handle? How dare he choose what kind of protection I needed without ever asking me? Where is he now? I asked. Is he with you? No, he's not scheduled to visit until next weekend. Sophie has that school play I mentioned in my text. So she was the one who'd been texting him about the play. Another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. Lily, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I need to understand what this is. Is my father... Are you two together? No, she said quickly. No, we're not romantic. We never have been. Thomas and I were co-parents, but that's all we've ever been. Co-parents. The term felt clinical, insufficient for whatever arrangement had allowed my father to maintain two separate families in two different states. Then how did this happen? How did Sophie... How is she his daughter if you're not together? Another long pause. I could hear voices in the background, young voices, and realized Sophie was probably home from school. Mia, this is really something your father should explain. But since you already know this much, I'll tell you the basics. Sophie was planned. Thomas wanted another child, but your mother couldn't. After you, she couldn't have more children. They tried for years before your mother got sick. My chest tightened. I'd never known Mom and Dad had wanted more kids. They'd never mentioned trying for siblings for me, never talked about fertility issues or disappointments. So he came to you? We met through a mutual friend who knew about our respective situations. I wanted to be a mother, but I'd never found the right partner. Thomas wanted another child, but couldn't have one with your mother. It was supposed to be a practical arrangement. Practical. Like they were discussing a business transaction instead of creating a human being. But it worked out differently than you expected? Sophie changed everything, Lily said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. The moment she was born, Thomas fell completely in love with her. He couldn't just be a distant biological father. He needed to be her dad, really be her dad. And I needed him to be too. So he's been flying to Portland for 7 years to play house with you and Sophie while telling me he was at work conferences. It's not playing house, Mia. He's been her father. He knows her favorite bedtime stories and what she likes for breakfast and how to braid her hair when I'm running late for school drop-off. He's never missed a birthday or a Christmas. He was there when she took her first steps and said her first word, which was "dad up," by the way. Each detail felt like a small knife. Dad had experienced all the milestones with Sophie that he'd experienced with me, but somehow Sophie's firsts felt like betrayals of mine. What was her first word? I found myself asking. Dada. She said it at 8 months old when Thomas was visiting. He cried. I remembered Dad crying when I said my first word too, though I only knew because Mom had told me the story 100 times. Hearing that he'd had the same reaction with Sophie should have felt touching, but instead it felt like proof that nothing about my relationship with him was unique. Mia, Lily said gently, I know this is overwhelming, but you have to understand that Thomas never wanted you to feel replaced or less important. You're his first child, his first love. Everything he learned about being a father, he learned with you. But he still chose to have another family without telling me. He chose to give Sophie a life where she could know her father, and he chose to protect you from having to share him during the hardest time of your life. That wasn't his choice to make. No, Lily agreed quietly. It wasn't, and I think he knows that now. I heard a door slam in the background, followed by a young voice calling, "Mom, I'm home!" Is that her? Yes. Mia, I have to ask you something, and please think carefully before you answer. What are you planning to do with this information? The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on uncovering the truth that I hadn't thought about what came next. I don't know, I said honestly. I need to talk to my father. Are you going to tell him you know? How can I not tell him? I'm not saying you shouldn't.
But Mia, Sophie doesn't know that you didn't know about her. As far as she's concerned, she has a sister who lives far away with Daddy, and someday she'll get to meet you. If this blows up badly, she's going to lose not just the hope of meeting you, but possibly her relationship with Thomas, too. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. I wasn't just dealing with my own betrayal and confusion anymore. There was a 6-year-old girl who'd done nothing wrong but exist, and whatever I did next would affect her life, too. I need some time to think, I said. Of course. Mia, can I give you my personal number in case you have more questions or if you want to talk? I wrote down her number, though I wasn't sure I'd use it. Talking to Lily felt too much like accepting this situation, like agreeing that what Dad had done was understandable rather than devastating. After we hung up, I sat in my room as the sun set outside my window, trying to process what I'd learned. Dad had wanted more kids.
Mom couldn't have them. Instead of accepting that reality or discussing other options with me, he'd found a woman willing to have his baby and had been living a secret double life ever since. But the more I thought about it, the more questions I had. If this was just a co-parenting arrangement, why all the secrecy? Why not tell me I had a half-sister? Why not let us meet, even if the circumstances of Sophie's conception were complicated? Unless there was more to the story than Lily had told me. I spent the evening researching everything I could find about Lily Morrison online. Her photography website was professional and extensive, showing years of work with families throughout Portland. Her social media was more personal, full of photos of Sophie at various ages, often with captions about their adventures together. But Dad wasn't in any of the social media photos. There were pictures of Sophie with other adults who were clearly friends or family members of Lily's, but no trace of Dad's presence in their documented life together. It was like he existed in their private moments, but had been carefully edited out of their public story, which made sense if they were trying to maintain the secret of his double life, but it also felt strange for a man who was supposedly such an involved father. I found Lily's professional Facebook page and scrolled through years of posts. Most were related to her photography business, but scattered throughout were more personal updates. A post from 5 years ago caught my attention. Grateful for the village that helps me raise my daughter. Being a single mom isn't easy, but having people who show up consistently makes all the difference. Single mom. Even though Dad was apparently such an involved father, Lily still considered herself a single mom. That felt significant, though I wasn't sure how. Another post from 3 years ago. Sophie asked me today why some of her friends have daddies who live with them and hers doesn't. Reminded me that even the most loving arrangements come with complications. The most loving arrangements. There was something wistful about the way she'd phrased it, like she was making the best of a situation that wasn't ideal. I closed my laptop and tried to imagine what the past 7 years had been like from Sophie's perspective. A little girl who saw her father regularly, but never got to have him around for ordinary Tuesday nights or Saturday morning pancakes, who had to explain to friends why her daddy lived far away, who probably wondered why she couldn't visit his house or meet his other family. Then I tried to imagine it from Dad's perspective, flying back and forth between 2 lives, 2 daughters, 2 versions of himself, always leaving one family to go to the other, never able to be completely present anywhere because part of him was always somewhere else. It sounded exhausting. It also sounded unsustainable. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up for dinner. There's leftover pizza in the fridge." I stared at the message, wondering if he was actually working late, or if he was on the phone with Lily, discussing my unexpected call. Did they coordinate their stories? Did they have emergency protocols for situations like this? I heated up the pizza and ate it standing at the kitchen counter, looking at the refrigerator covered with photos and school awards and silly magnets we'd collected over the years. Evidence of a life that had felt complete until today. Now everything looked different. The photo of Dad and me at my high school graduation seemed staged.
like he was performing the role of proud single father while thinking about another daughter he'd never get to see graduate. The silly Father's Day card I'd made him last year felt naive, full of gratitude for being the best dad in the world when I'd only known half of his parenting life. I went to bed early but couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sophie's gap-toothed smile and wondered what she was like. Was she funny like Dad? Did she inherit his terrible singing voice and his ability to fall asleep anywhere? Did she know about me the way I should have known about her? Around midnight, I heard Dad come home. His footsteps were heavier than usual, and he moved through the house more slowly, like he was tired in a way that went beyond normal work exhaustion. I waited until I heard his bedroom door close, then crept downstairs to see if he'd left any evidence of where he'd really been. His laptop was on the kitchen table, still warm. I knew I shouldn't look, but I couldn't stop myself. He'd left his email open, and the most recent message was from Lily, sent just an hour ago. She called me tonight. She knows about Sophie. We need to talk. His reply, sent from his phone based on the timestamp. How much does she know? Lily's response. Everything I felt comfortable telling her. But Thomas, she's hurt and confused. She deserves the whole truth. Dad's final message. I know. I've always known this day would come. I just hoped I had more time. More time for what? To figure out how to explain 7 years of deception? To prepare Sophie for the possibility that her secret sister might reject her? To decide which family mattered more if he could only choose one? I closed the laptop and went back upstairs, my mind spinning with new questions. Dad knew this discovery was inevitable, which meant he'd been living with the constant anxiety of being found out. Every work conference lie, every declined phone call, every careful edit of his stories had been part of an elaborate performance he knew couldn't last forever. The next morning, Dad was already gone when I woke up. He'd left a note saying he had an early meeting, but I wondered if he was avoiding me, buying time to figure out how to handle what Lily had told him. I spent the morning skipping classes and driving aimlessly around our small town, trying to process everything I'd learned. Our quiet suburban neighborhood felt surreal now, like a movie set designed to look normal while hiding dramatic secrets. I found myself parked outside the elementary school I had attended, watching children pour out the doors at dismissal. Somewhere in Portland, Sophie was probably getting out of school too, maybe looking for Dad in the pickup line and being disappointed when he wasn't there. My phone rang with an unknown number, and I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Is this Mia? The voice was small, young, nervous. My heart stopped. Who is this? This is Sophie, your sister. Mom gave me your number. She said you might want to talk to me. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands shaking. Sophie? Why are you calling me? Because you're my sister, and I've been waiting my whole life to talk to you. Sophie, does your mom know you're calling me? She's right here. She said it was okay if I wanted to talk to you for a few minutes. I heard Lily's voice in the background, probably giving Sophie encouragement or guidance on what to say. What did you want to talk about? I asked gently. Everything! Sophie's excitement was infectious, despite my emotional turmoil. I want to know what you look like and what your favorite color is, and if you like the same foods as Daddy and me. And I want to tell you about my school and my friends and my volcano project that Daddy helped me with. Each mention of Daddy was like a small punch to the gut, but Sophie's excitement was so genuine that I found myself smiling despite everything. What's your favorite color? I asked. Purple, but not regular purple, the really dark purple like grapes. What's yours? Green, like the color of grass in spring. Ooh, that's pretty too. Daddy says you're really smart and that you're going to college someday. I want to go to college too. I want to study volcanoes. That sounds amazing. What made you interested in volcanoes? Daddy showed me this video about how they're formed, and it's so cool how the Earth makes its own fire. Do you know about volcanoes? For the next 10 minutes, Sophie chattered about school and friends and her latest science project, occasionally asking me questions about my life, but mostly just sharing her own world with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of a 6-year-old who'd finally got to talk to someone she'd been curious about forever. It was simultaneously the most normal and most surreal conversation I'd ever had. Sophie talked to me like I was already part of her life, like this wasn't the first time we'd spoken, but simply a long overdue catch-up call. "Sophie," I said when there was finally a pause in her chatter, "can I ask you something?" "Uh-huh." "What did your mom and dad tell you about me? About why we've never met?" "They said you live really far away with Daddy, and that grown-up life is complicated sometimes. But that doesn't mean people don't love each other. Mom said someday, when the timing was right, we'd all get to be together." The innocent acceptance in her voice made my chest ache. Sophie had spent her entire life believing that someday she'd meet me, that someday we'd all be one big happy family.
She had no idea that I'd been completely ignorant of her existence until yesterday. "I'd like to meet you too," I said, and realized I meant it despite everything. "Really? Mom, she says she wants to meet me too. Can you come visit us? We have a really good playground near our house, and I know all the best places to find cool rocks." Before I could answer, I heard Lily's voice getting closer to the phone. "Sophie, sweetie, let me talk to Mia for a minute, okay?" "Okay, but Mia, don't go away forever, okay? I want to talk to you again soon." "I won't go away," I promised, though I had no idea if that was true. Lily came back on the line. "I'm sorry if that was overwhelming. She's been so excited since I told her you called yesterday." "She's wonderful," I said, and meant it. "She's exactly what I would have expected Dad's daughter to be like. She adores him, and she's been asking about you for years. Mia, I know this situation is complicated, but she's innocent in all of this. Whatever happens between you and Thomas, I hope you'll consider having some kind of relationship with her." "I want to," I said, "but I need to understand more about how this all works. How does Dad manage this? How do you manage this? What's the plan for the future?" "There isn't really a plan," Lily admitted. "We've just been taking it year by year, doing what seemed best for Sophie while trying to honor your relationship with Thomas too. But what happens when Sophie gets older and starts asking harder questions? What happens when she wants to bring friends over and they want to know why her dad doesn't live with her? What happens when I graduate college and want to settle down somewhere? Or when I get married and want my father to be there completely?" Lily was quiet for a moment. "Those are all questions Thomas needs to answer. But Mia, I think part of why this has gone on so long is that there aren't easy answers. Every choice he makes affects multiple people he loves. So he just chose to lie to everyone instead of making hard decisions? I think he chose to try to protect everyone instead of forcing anyone to sacrifice. But you're right that it isn't sustainable." That night, I waited up for Dad to come home. I'd made dinner for both of us and set the table like normal, but nothing about the evening felt normal. I was about to confront my father with the biggest deception of my life, and I had no idea how he'd react. He walked in at 7:30, looking surprised to see me sitting at the dining room table with 2 plates of spaghetti and meatballs. "This is nice, sweetheart. What's the occasion?" "Sit down, Dad. We need to talk." Something in my tone made his expression change immediately. The careful cheer dropped from his face, and he looked suddenly older, more tired. "Mia, what's wrong?" "I know about Sophie." The words hung in the air between us like a bridge neither of us wanted to cross. Dad's face went through several expressions, rapid fire: surprise, panic, resignation, and finally something that looked almost like relief. He sat down heavily in his chair and stared at his plate for a long time before looking up at me. "How long have you known?" "Since yesterday. I found photos in your wallet, tracked down Lily's photography business, and called her pretending to be a potential client." Dad winced. "And she told you?" "Some of it. She told me Sophie is my half-sister and that you've been her father since she was born. She told me this has been going on for 7 years. Mia, I can explain." "Can you? Can you explain why you've been lying to me for 7 years? Can you explain why I have a 6-year-old sister who knows all about me while I knew nothing about her. Can you explain why you've been flying to Portland to play father to another family while pretending to be devoted to just me? My voice was rising despite my attempts to stay calm. All the hurt and confusion and betrayal I'd been holding in came pouring out. Can you explain why you made me believe I was enough for you when apparently I wasn't? When apparently you needed another daughter to feel complete? Stop. Dad's voice was firm but not angry. Mia, stop. You are enough. You've always been enough. Sophie isn't a replacement for you or an improvement on you. She's also my daughter. But why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you let me know I had a sister? Dad rubbed his face with both hands, looking every one of his 52 years. Because your mother was dying and you were 17 years old, and you were already losing so much. How could I tell you that while you were watching the only parent you'd ever had waste away? I was across the country playing happy family with a baby. You could have told me after Mom died. Could I? You were grieving and angry and barely speaking to me for months after the funeral. You blamed me for not saving her, for not trying harder, for not being enough. How was I supposed to say, "Oh, by the way, I have another daughter who I've been perfectly fine with all along"? His words stung because they contained enough truth to hurt. I had blamed him after Mom died, had been angry at him for moving forward when I wanted the world to stop. But it's been 2 years since Mom died. 2 years when things were good again between us. 2 years when you could have told me the truth. I know, he said quietly. And I wanted to. God, Mia, I wanted to tell you so many times. Every time Sophie asked when she'd get to meet her big sister. Every time you said you wished you had siblings. Every time I saw you looking lonely in this big house. Then why didn't you? Because I was afraid you'd hate me, and I was afraid you'd hate Sophie, and she doesn't deserve that. And I was afraid that if I told you the truth about how she came to exist, you'd think less of me and less of your mother's memory. What do you mean how she came to exist? Dad looked at me for a long moment, and I could see him making a decision about how much truth he was ready to tell. Your mother knew, Mia, about Sophie. She knew from the beginning. The words hit me like cold water. Mom knew. All this time I'd been thinking about Dad as a cheater, as someone who'd betrayed our family, but Mom had known about Sophie from the beginning. What do you mean she knew? My voice came out barely above a whisper. Dad leaned back in his chair, his eyes focused somewhere over my shoulder like he was looking into the past. We tried for years to give you a sibling. Years, Mia. We went to specialists, tried treatments, spent thousands of dollars we didn't really have. The doctors finally told us it wasn't going to happen. Your mother was devastated. I felt like I was hearing about strangers. My parents had never mentioned wanting more kids, never hinted at fertility struggles or disappointment about family size. She never said anything to me about wanting more kids. Because you are perfect exactly as you were, and we didn't want you to feel like you weren't enough. But your mother, she grew up in a big family, and she always imagined having 5 or 6 kids. When the doctor said it was impossible, she went into a depression that lasted months. Dad's voice was quiet, careful, like he was handling fragile glass. I started seeing a counselor to help me deal with watching my mother grieve something we'd never have, and that's where I met Dr. Sarah Martinez, who ran a support group for people dealing with fertility issues. And through that group, I met Lily. So you met her in therapy.
Lily was there because she wanted to be a mother, but she'd never found the right partner. She'd been considering donor insemination, but she wanted her child to have the possibility of knowing their biological father. It wasn't supposed to be about romance or a relationship. It was supposed to be about giving 2 people what they wanted most. The clinical way he described it made my stomach churn. They'd treated Sophie's conception like a business transaction. And Mom agreed to this? Dad finally looked directly at me, his eyes red-rimmed with exhaustion. It was your mother's idea. The kitchen seemed to tilt around me. My mother, the woman I'd thought of as traditional and conservative, the woman who taught me about commitment and family values, had suggested that her husband father a child with another woman? I don't understand. Your mother said that if we couldn't have more children together, maybe we could help someone else become a parent while I got to experience fatherhood again. She said it would be like giving part of our family to someone who needed it. But that's insane. That's not how families work.
Isn't it? People donate eggs and sperm to help other families all the time. People use surrogates. This wasn't that different, except that I would maintain a relationship with the child. It's completely different. Those arrangements don't involve the donor being a full-time parent to the resulting child. Dad sighed deeply. It wasn't supposed to involve that. I was supposed to be a known donor who maybe saw the child occasionally, sent birthday cards, that sort of thing. But when Sophie was born, he trailed off, and his expression softened in a way that made me simultaneously want to hug him and hit him. When Sophie was born, everything changed. Looking at her, holding her, I couldn't just be a distant donor. She was my daughter. She looked like you did as a baby, had the same stubborn chin, the same way of gripping my finger like she was never going to let go. So you decided to be her father without asking anyone else how they felt about it? Lily needed help. She'd planned to raise Sophie alone, but knew motherhood was overwhelming, and your mother was getting sicker, and I was trying to be present for both of you, and everything just evolved in a way none of us had planned. I stared at my father, trying to reconcile the man I'd known my entire life with the person who'd made these choices. Did Mom know you were going to Portland regularly? Did she know you were missing her appointments to be with Sophie? Dad flinched. I never missed your mother's appointments. But you missed other things. Dinners, movie nights, family time. How many times did you tell us you were at work conferences when you were actually playing father to Sophie? Mia, please understand. I was trying to honor what your mother wanted while also being the father Sophie needed. It was impossible to do both perfectly. What did Mom think about you having a second family? Was she okay with you loving another child? She was proud of me for stepping up. She said it showed the kind of man she'd married, that I couldn't abandon a child who needed me. The conversation felt surreal. I was learning that everything I'd believed about my parents' relationship was incomplete, that decisions had been made about our family that I'd never been consulted about or even informed of. When did Mom get sick, in relation to Sophie being born? Dad was quiet for a long moment. Sophie was 2 when your mother was diagnosed. She was 4 when your mother started chemo. So for 2 years, Mom was healthy, and you were traveling to Portland to be with your other daughter, and she was okay with that? She encouraged it. She said Sophie deserved to have her father in her life, especially since her own health was becoming uncertain. I felt like I was drowning in information that contradicted everything I thought I knew about my family. Did Mom ever meet Sophie? No. We talked about it. But your mother was worried about making the situation more complicated than it already was. She thought it would be easier for everyone if those lives stayed separate. Easier for who? Not easier for Sophie, who spent 6 years wondering why her father's other family was a secret. Not easier for me, finding out I have a sister through wallet photos. You're right, Dad said quietly. It wasn't easier for anyone. It was just postponing difficult conversations for 7 years. For 7 years. We sat in silence for several minutes, both of us staring at our untouched dinner. Finally, I asked the question that had been building in my chest since this conversation started. Do you love her more than me? Dad's head snapped up, his expression shocked. What? Sophie, do you love her more than me? She gets the version of you that's excited and present. She gets bedtime stories and bike riding lessons and science fair projects. I get the version of you that's tired from traveling and distracted by phone calls you can't take and guilty about things I don't understand. Mia, no. God, no. I don't love Sophie more than you. But you love her the same as me. Dad hesitated, and that hesitation was answer enough. She's also my daughter, he said finally. I can't love her less because the circumstances of her birth were complicated. And I can't pretend that doesn't change everything about our family. Does it have to change everything? Can't there be room for both of you? The plaintive hope in his voice broke something in me. Dad wasn't a villain. He was just a man who'd made choices that seemed right at the time and had been trying to manage the consequences ever since. I don't know, I said honestly. I need to meet her. What? I need to meet Sophie. I need to see Portland, see where you go when you're not here, understand what your life with her actually looks like. Dad looked terrified. Mia, I don't think that's a good idea right away. This is all very fresh and emotions are running high. I already talked to her. You what? I talked to her today. Lily gave her my number. We talked for 10 minutes about volcanoes and favorite colors and how much she wants to meet me. Dad buried his face in his hands. Oh, God, what did you tell her? I told her I wanted to meet her too. Because I do, Dad. Despite everything, despite feeling betrayed and confused and angry, I want to know my sister. Mia, you have to understand. Sophie doesn't know that you didn't know about her. She thinks we've all just been waiting for the right time to get together. I know. Lily told me. Which means someone needs to decide what we're going to tell her if I come to Portland. If you come to Portland? I'm going, Dad. With or without your approval, I'm going to meet Sophie. The question is whether you're going to help me figure out how to do it in a way that doesn't traumatize a 6-year-old. Dad stared at me for a long time, and I could see him calculating options, trying to figure out how to manage this new variable in his carefully balanced equation.
"What do you want from this visit?" he asked finally. "I want to understand. I want to see the house where my sister lives, meet the woman who's been co-parenting with you for 7 years, and figure out if there's a way for our family to work that doesn't involve lies and secrets. And if you decide there isn't, if you meet Sophie and decide you can't handle having a sister, or you meet Lily and decide you can't accept this arrangement." The question hurt because it forced me to confront possibilities I didn't want to consider. "Then we'll figure it out." "But Dad, I can't keep pretending this doesn't exist now that I know. I can't go back to our Tuesday night dinners and weekend movies and pretend I don't know you have another daughter who's waiting for you to call her before bedtime." Dad nodded slowly. "Okay. When do you want to go?" "This weekend. Sophie has a play on Friday night and I want to be there." "How do you know about the play?" "Lily mentioned it." "Sophie's been texting you about it, hasn't she?" "Yes, she's playing a tree in the fall festival production." "Then I want to see her be a tree. I want to sit in the audience and watch my sister perform and see you clap for her like you used to clap for my school plays." Dad's eyes filled with tears. "Mia, are you sure you're ready for this?" "No, I'm not ready for any of this, but I'm going anyway." That night, I called Lily to tell her I was coming to Portland. She was surprised, but pleased, and we spent an hour discussing logistics and expectations. "Sophie is going to be over the moon," Lily said. "She's been practicing her play lines extra hard because she wants to impress you." "What should I tell her about why we've never met before?" "I think we tell her the truth in an age-appropriate way. That grown-ups sometimes make things more complicated than they need to be, but that family love doesn't have distance limits." "And what do I call you? What's our relationship going to be?" Lily was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. We'll have to figure that out as we go, but Mia, I want you to know that I've always hoped this day would come. Sophie needs to know all of her family, even if it makes things more complicated for your arrangement with Dad. Especially then. What Thomas and I have works for now, but Sophie deserves better than a part-time father and a sister she only knows through stories." On Thursday night, I packed a weekend bag with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Dad had booked me a red-eye flight to Portland, and he'd be flying out the next morning to arrive in time for Sophie's play. "Are you nervous?" he asked, finding me in my room surrounded by rejected outfit choices. "Terrified," I admitted. "Me too." "What are you afraid of?" Dad sat on the edge of my bed, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "I'm afraid you'll meet Sophie and think I love her more than you. I'm afraid you'll meet Lily and think I should have been with her instead of your mother. I'm afraid you'll decide that I'm a terrible person who's ruined multiple lives trying to make everyone happy. And I'm afraid I'll meet Sophie and not feel connected to her," I said.
I'm afraid I'll meet Lily and resent her for having part of you that I didn't know existed. I'm afraid I'll see you with your other family and realize that I don't know who you really are." We sat in silence for several minutes, both of us contemplating the ways the next few days could go wrong. "Dad," I said finally, "whatever happens this weekend, I want you to know that I love you. I'm hurt and confused and angry, but I love you. I love you too, sweetheart, more than I've ever been able to properly explain." The flight to Portland was turbulent, both literally and metaphorically. I stared out the window at the lights below and tried to imagine what it would be like to hug a sister I'd never met, to sit in an audience watching her perform, and to navigate a family dinner with people who'd been strangers until this week. Lily picked me up at the airport, and I recognized her immediately from her photos. She was smaller than I had expected, with laugh lines around her eyes and paint-stained fingers that suggested she'd been working on art projects with Sophie. "You look just like Thomas," she said, pulling me into a hug that felt surprisingly natural. Same stubborn chin, same thoughtful eyes. "Sophie has the same chin too, from the photos I've seen." "She does. It's one of the things that made it obvious she was his from the moment she was born." The drive from the airport took us through downtown Portland and into a neighborhood full of craftsman houses with big front porches and mature trees. It was charming in a way that made me understand why someone would want to build a life there. "Sophie's at school," Lily explained, as we pulled into the driveway of a blue house with white trim. "I thought you might want to see the house and get settled before she gets home. She's so excited she couldn't sleep last night." The house was exactly what I had expected from someone who specialized in family photography. Warm, lived in, full of natural light, and candid photos of Sophie at various ages. The refrigerator was covered in her artwork, and there were science books scattered on the coffee table. "She's been reading everything she can find about volcanoes," Lily said, following my gaze. "Thomas brought her a book about Pompeii last time he visited, and now she wants to be a volcanologist." "When was the last time he was here?" 3 weeks ago. He comes about once a month, sometimes more if Sophie has something special happening." I tried to do the math in my head. Once a month for 7 years was at least 84 visits to Portland that I'd known nothing about. What does Sophie think about him living so far away? "She's used to it, but she asks questions. Why doesn't Daddy live with us like her friends' dads? Why can't she visit his house? Why hasn't she met you yet?" We've tried to give her answers that were honest without being more complicated than a child should have to understand. What kind of answers? That grown-ups sometimes make things more complicated than they need to be, but that family love doesn't have distance limits. And what do I call you? What's our relationship going to be? Lily was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. We'll have to figure that out as we go, but Mia, I want you to know that I've always hoped this day would come. Sophie needs to know all of her family. Even if it makes things more complicated for your arrangement with Dad, especially then. What Thomas and I have works for now, but Sophie deserves better than a part-time father and a sister she only knows through stories." On Thursday night, I packed a weekend bag with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Dad had booked me a red-eye flight to Portland, and he'd be flying out the next morning to arrive in time for Sophie's play. "Are you nervous?" he asked, finding me in my room surrounded by rejected outfit choices. "Terrified," I admitted. "Me too." "What are you afraid of?" Dad sat on the edge of my bed, looking older than I'd ever seen him. "I'm afraid you'll meet Sophie and think I love her more than you. I'm afraid you'll meet Lily and think I should have been with her instead of your mother. I'm afraid I'm a terrible person who's ruined multiple lives trying to make everyone happy. And I'm afraid I'll meet Sophie and not feel connected to her," I said. "I'm afraid I'll meet Lily and resent her for having part of you that I didn't know existed. I'm afraid I'll see you with your other family and realize that I don't know who you really are." We sat in silence for several minutes, both of us contemplating the ways the next few days could go wrong. "Dad," I said finally, "whatever happens this weekend, I want you to know that I love you. I'm hurt and confused and angry, but I love you. I love you too, sweetheart, more than I've ever been able to properly explain." The flight to Portland was turbulent, both literally and metaphorically. I stared out the window at the lights below and tried to imagine what it would be like to hug a sister I'd never met, to sit in an audience watching her perform, and to navigate a family dinner with people who'd been strangers until this week. Lily picked me up at the airport, and I recognized her immediately from her photos. She was smaller than I'd expected, with laugh lines around her eyes and paint-stained fingers that suggested she'd been working on art projects with Sophie. "You look just like Thomas," she said, pulling me into a hug that felt surprisingly natural. "Same stubborn chin, same thoughtful eyes." "Sophie has the same chin too from the photos I've seen." "She does. It's one of the things that made it obvious she was his from the moment she was born." The drive from the airport took us through downtown Portland and into a neighborhood full of craftsman houses with big front porches and mature trees. It was charming in a way that made me understand why someone would want to build a life there. "Sophie's at school," Lily explained, as we pulled into the driveway of a blue house with white trim. "I thought you might want to see the house and get settled before she gets home. She's so excited she couldn't sleep last night." The house was exactly what I had expected from someone who specialized in family photography. Warm, lived in, full of natural light, and candid photos of Sophie at various ages. The refrigerator was covered in her artwork, and there were science books scattered on the coffee table. "She's been reading everything she can find about volcanoes," Lily said. "She's been reading everything she can find about volcanoes," Lily said, following my gaze. "Thomas brought her a book about Pompeii last time he visited, and now she wants to be a volcanologist." "When was the last time he was here?" 3 weeks ago. He comes about once a month, sometimes more if Sophie has something special happening." I tried to do the math in my head. Once a month for 7 years was at least 84 visits to Portland that I'd known nothing about. What does Sophie think about him living so far away? "She's used to it, but she asks questions. Why doesn't Daddy live with us like her friends' dads? Why can't she visit his house? Why hasn't she met you yet?" We've tried to give her answers that were honest without being more complicated than a child should have to understand. What kind of answers? That grown-ups sometimes make things more complicated than they need to be, but that family love doesn't have distance limits. "And what do I call you? What's our relationship going to be?" Lily was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. We'll have to figure that out as we go, but Mia, I want you to know that I've always hoped this day would come. Sophie needs to know all of her family, even if it makes things more complicated for your arrangement with Dad. Especially then. What Thomas and I have..."
Dad looked relaxed in these pictures, genuinely happy in a way I hadn't seen since before Mom got sick. "Sophie," I said carefully, "what do you know about me? I mean, what has Daddy told you?" "He says you're the smartest person he knows and that you're in college learning about helping people. He says you have his stubborn chin but Mom's kind heart, and that someday, when you're not so busy with school, we'll get to spend time together." Mom's kind heart. It was strange to hear Sophie reference my mother so casually, like she'd known her. "What else do you know about my mom?" "Daddy says she was very sick, and that's why you and Daddy needed to spend lots of time together without other people around, but that she would have loved me if she'd gotten to meet me." The simple acceptance in Sophie's voice broke something open in my chest. She didn't question why family relationships were complicated, didn't resent the circumstances that had kept us apart. She just accepted that sometimes grown-ups had reasons for things that kids didn't understand. That evening, the three of us made dinner together, a chaotic affair involving spaghetti sauce on the ceiling and Sophie's running commentary on everything from her teacher's new haircut to her theory about why cats purr. "Tomorrow night is my play," she announced as we were cleaning up. "I'm a maple tree, and I get to throw leaves at the audience during the wind scene." "I'll be there," I promised. "You will? Really? Daddy said he was coming, but I didn't know you would be there too." "I wouldn't miss it." After Sophie went to bed, Lily and I sat on the front porch with cups of tea, watching the sun set behind the mountains. "She's amazing," I said. "She is, and she's so much like Thomas, it sometimes takes my breath away. What's it been like, doing this alone, raising her with a part-time father?" Lily was quiet for a long time before answering. "Lonely sometimes. Wonderful most of the time. Complicated always." She turned to look at me.
But I want you to know that Thomas has been the best father he could be given the circumstances. He's never missed a birthday or a Christmas. He calls her every night when he's not here. He knows every detail of her life. But he doesn't live here. He doesn't do bedtime routines or morning pancakes or homework help on Tuesday nights. No, he doesn't. And Sophie notices. She asks why her daddy can't live with us like other daddies live with their families. What do you tell her? That some families look different than others, but that doesn't make them less real or less loving. Do you think she believes that? I think she wants to believe it, but she's getting older and the questions are getting harder to answer. Dad arrived the next morning, and watching him with Sophie was like seeing a completely different person. He was playful, present, completely focused on her in a way that made me understand why she adored him so much. But it also made me realize how much of himself he'd been holding back in his life with me. Not because he loved me less, but because he'd been carrying the weight of this secret for so long that spontaneous joy had become difficult. "Daddy, look, Mia's here," Sophie announced, unnecessarily, since Dad and I had already greeted each other. "I see that, sweetheart. Are you excited to have your sister here for your play?" "So excited. I practiced extra hard because I wanted to be perfect for Mia." The casual way she said "your sister" made it clear that Dad had been talking about me as Sophie's sister for years, even though I had no idea she existed. That afternoon, the three of us took Sophie to a park near the house, and I watched Dad push her on swings and help her across monkey bars with the same patience and enthusiasm he'd shown with me at that age. "Higher, Daddy, push me higher," Sophie called from the swing. "Any higher and you'll fly away," Dad teased, giving her another push. "If I fly away, will you catch me?" "Always, sweetheart. I'll always catch you." The exchange was so natural, so full of the easy affection between father and daughter, that I felt a ping of something that might have been jealousy or might have been grief for all the moments like this I'd missed with them. That evening, we all went to Sophie's school for the fall festival production. The elementary school auditorium was packed with parents and grandparents, everyone armed with cameras and proud smiles. Sophie's class performed a story about the changing seasons, with each child playing a different element of nature. Sophie was indeed a maple tree with a brown construction paper trunk costume and red and orange paper leaves attached to her arms. When her scene came, she stood perfectly still until the narrator mentioned wind, then began shaking her leaf-covered arms with such enthusiasm that several paper leaves actually did fly into the audience. She caught my eye in the crowd and grinned so widely I thought her face might crack. "That's my sister," she whispered loudly, enough for the entire first row to hear. After the show, Sophie ran to us still wearing her tree costume, leaves trailing behind her like confetti. "Did you see me? Did you see how I threw leaves?" "You were perfect," Daddy said, scooping her up in a hug. "The best tree in the whole forest." "Mia, did you like it?" "I loved it. You're a natural performer." Standing there in that elementary school hallway, surrounded by families celebrating their children's achievements, I felt like I was seeing my father clearly for the first time in years. He wasn't a man torn between two families. He was a father who loved both his daughters completely, but had never figured out how to love us together. The next morning, Sophie woke up early and climbed into bed with me, chattering about plans for the day. "Can we make pancakes? Daddy makes the best pancakes, but maybe you know how to make pancakes too, since you're his daughter like me." "I do know how to make pancakes. Maybe we can make them together." In the kitchen, I watched Sophie and Dad work together with the easy familiarity of people who'd shared this routine countless times. She knew exactly how he liked his coffee, knew to stay away from the stove when he was flipping pancakes, knew that he always made one pancake shaped like a Mickey Mouse head. "Mickey Mouse pancakes are our tradition," Sophie explained to me. "Daddy started making them when I was little, and now we always have them when he visits." Mickey Mouse pancakes had been our tradition, too, when I was Sophie's age. Sunday mornings with cartoon-shaped pancakes and Dad's terrible singing while he cooked. "Did you and Daddy have traditions, too?"
Sophie asked, as if she could read my thoughts. We did, lots of them. What kind? I found myself telling Sophie about movie nights and terrible singing and the way that Dad always let me pick the music in the car, even when I was going through my boy band phase. Daddy sings terribly for me, too, Sophie giggled. He knows all the songs from my favorite movies, but he sounds like a sick frog. That's exactly what he sounds like. Has he done the voice where he pretends to be different characters from movies? Yes, he does the dragon voice and the princess voice and the funny sidekick voice all at the same time. We spent the morning swapping stories about Dad's quirks and habits, and I realized that Sophie and I had grown up with the same father in all the ways that mattered. He'd brought the same patience, the same silly sense of humor, the same unconditional love to both of us. That afternoon, while Sophie was napping, I sat with Dad and Lily on their back deck, trying to figure out what happened next. This can't keep going the way it has been. Sophie is getting older, and she's going to want more than part-time visits and phone calls. I know, but I don't know what the alternative is. You could move here, Lily suggested quietly. Portland's not that far from our old town. Mia could visit, maybe even transfer schools if she wanted. I can't ask Mia to uproot her entire life because I made complicated choices. You're not asking me. I'm considering it on my own. Both of them stared at me. What do you mean? Dad asked. I mean, I've been thinking about transferring anyway. My college has a campus in Oregon, and I've been feeling stuck lately, like I needed a change. Mia, you don't have to do that. I know I don't have to, but maybe I want to. Maybe I want to be somewhere where I can have Sunday morning pancakes with both my father and my sister.
Are you sure? Lily asked. This would be a huge change for you. Everything's already changed, I said. Finding out about Sophie, understanding that Mom knew, realizing that our family was never just the three of us. I can't go back to pretending I don't know about any of this. But what about your life, your friends, your routine? What about Sophie's life? She spent 6 years believing that someday she'd have a complete family. Maybe it's time to stop making her wait. That evening, we all sat down for what felt like the most important family meeting of my life. Sophie, Dad said carefully, how would you feel if Daddy lived here in Portland instead of far away? Sophie's eyes went wide. You mean like all the time? Like other daddies? Like all the time. And Mia could visit whenever she wanted? Actually, I said, taking a deep breath, I was thinking maybe I could live here too, at least while I finish school. Sophie launched herself off the couch and wrapped both Dad and me in the biggest hug her small arms could manage. We be a real family, all together. We're already a real family, sweetheart, Dad said. We're just figuring out how to be together in the same place. Over the next few hours, we talked through the logistics. Dad's accounting work could be done remotely, or he could find a firm in Portland. I could transfer schools for my final year. Lily already had her photography business established. It wouldn't be easy. There would be legal complications, financial considerations, the challenge of blending our different lives into something that worked for everyone. But sitting there with my father and my sister and the woman who'd been taking care of part of our family for 7 years, it felt possible in a way I hadn't expected. There's one more thing, I said as we were cleaning up after dinner. I want to know more about Mom's role in all of this. I want to understand what she really thought about Sophie, what she hoped would happen. Dad nodded. I have letters, things your mother wrote to Sophie before she died, but I never gave them to her because I thought it would be too confusing. Letters? Your mother wanted Sophie to know that she was loved, even by family members she'd never met. She wrote her letters for birthdays and holidays, thinking that someday, when Sophie was older and could understand, she'd want to read them. I want to read them too. Are you sure? They might change how you think about your mother. Dad, Everything about this situation has already changed how I think about all of us. I'd rather know the whole truth than keep discovering pieces of it accidentally. That night, Dad gave me a box of letters written in Mom's careful handwriting, addressed to Sophie Chen Morrison, my husband's other daughter. The first letter was dated 2 weeks after Sophie's birth. Dear Sophie, today I saw your first photos and you are beautiful. Your daddy is already so in love with you, and I can see why. You have his stubborn chin and what I suspect will be his kind heart. I want you to know that even though we may never meet, you are part of our family. Your existence doesn't take anything away from the love your daddy and I have for Mia. And I hope that someday, when you're old enough to understand complicated grown-up situations, you'll know that you were created from love, even if it's not the traditional kind. I read through years of letters, birthday wishes and holiday greetings and updates about our family that Mom had wanted Sophie to eventually receive. The letters painted a picture of a woman who'd found peace with an unusual situation, who genuinely wanted Dad to be a father to Sophie, who'd hoped that someday all of us could be family together. The last letter was dated just a month before Mom died. Dear Sophie, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. But I want you to know that one of my last wishes is that you and Mia will find each other. You're both such important parts of your daddy's heart, and I think you'll be important parts of each other's hearts, too. Mia is going to need a sister, and you deserve to know the wonderful young woman who shares your father with you. Take care of each other, and take care of your daddy. He's going to need both of you more than he knows how to ask for. Love, the mother you never met, but who loved you anyway. I stayed up all night reading and rereading Mom's letters, trying to reconcile this version of her with the woman I thought I'd known. She hadn't just tolerated Dad's relationship with Sophie. She'd actively hoped for it, planned for it, wanted all of us to eventually be family together. The next morning, I found Dad in the kitchen making coffee, looking like he hadn't slept much either. Did you read them? All of them. Dad, why didn't you ever show these to Sophie or to me? Because I was afraid they'd make everything more complicated. Because I thought it would be easier for everyone if those relationships stayed separate. But Mom didn't want them to stay separate. She wanted us to be family. I know. But after she died and you were grieving so hard, I couldn't figure out how to honor what she had wanted without making your grief worse. So you made the decision for all of us? I made the wrong decision for all of us. We stood in silence for several minutes, both of us processing 7 years of missed opportunities and postponed truth-telling. We can't change the past, I said finally, but we can change what happens next. What do you want to happen next? I want to give Sophie her letters. I want to move to Portland and finish school here. I want to have family dinners where everyone's actually present instead of distracted by secrets. I want to stop tiptoeing around the fact that we're all related. Are you sure? Really sure? Because once we do this, once we try to blend these lives together, there's no going back to the way things were. Good. I don't want to go back to the way things were. The way things were was based on lies and half-truths and people making decisions about my life without including me. Later that morning, I sat with Sophie on her bed and handed her the box of letters from Mom. These are from someone very special. Do you know who my mom was? Daddy's wife who got sick? That's right. And before she died, she wrote you letters. She wanted you to have them when you were old enough to understand. She knew about me, she knew about you, and she loved you, even though you never got to meet. She says I'm part of your family. You are part of our family. You always have been. That afternoon, as I packed for my flight back home to arrange the transfer and tie up loose ends, Sophie clung to me like she was afraid I might disappear forever. You're really coming back, right? You're really going to live here?
I'm really coming back. It might take a few weeks to get everything arranged, but yes, I'm coming back. And Daddy's going to live here too? Daddy's going to live here too. And we'll be a real family? Sophie, we're already a real family. We're just going to be a real family who lives in the same place. The flight home gave me hours to think about the decision I was making. Leaving the town where I'd grown up, transferring schools, moving across the country to live with people who'd been strangers a week ago. But they weren't strangers anymore. Sophie was my sister, with Dad's stubborn chin and Mom's kind heart, and an enthusiasm for life that made me want to be a better person. Lily was the woman who'd been taking care of part of our family for 7 years, who'd answered my questions with honesty even when it would have been easier to lie. And Dad was still my father, flawed but human, and trying to do right by everyone he loved, even when those efforts led to complicated, imperfect solutions. 3 months later, I was officially a resident of Portland, enrolled in the Oregon campus of my university and living in a small apartment near Sophie's school. Dad had found work with a local firm and was renting a house just 6 blocks from Lily and Sophie's place. Our first official family dinner in Portland was chaos. Sophie insisted on cooking, which meant Dad and I spent most of the evening preventing kitchen disasters, while Lily documented everything with her camera. The spaghetti was overcooked, the garlic bread was burnt, and Sophie spilled sauce on her favorite dress. It was perfect. "This is what families do," Sophie announced proudly, as we sat around Lily's dining room table. "They eat together and make messes and laugh at Daddy's terrible jokes." "Hey, my jokes are excellent," Dad protested, which made Sophie giggle so hard she nearly choked on her spaghetti. "They're terrible," I agreed, "but we love you anyway." The adjustment wasn't always easy. Sophie had to learn to share Dad's attention with me, and I had to learn to navigate the complex dynamics of a non-traditional family structure. There were moments of jealousy, confusion, and awkward conversations about boundaries and expectations. But there were also Sunday morning pancakes with both my father and my sister. Science projects that turned the kitchen into a volcano laboratory. Movie nights where Sophie fell asleep between Dad and me on the couch, her small hand holding mine even in sleep. Lily and I developed a friendship based on our shared love for the people who connected us, but also on genuine affection for each other. She taught me about photography, and I helped her with the business side of her growing client base. We became sisters of choice, bound together by the complicated circumstances that had brought us into each other's lives. Dad transformed too. The weight of maintaining secrets was gone, and with it went years of careful tension I hadn't realized he'd been carrying. He laughed more freely, sang his terrible songs without self-consciousness, and threw himself into fatherhood with both daughters in ways he'd never been able to do when we were separated by distance and deception. 6 months after I moved to Portland, Sophie had her 7th birthday party. Dad and I planned it together, a joint effort that involved way too much pink frosting and a backyard full of children hopped up on sugar and excitement. "Make a wish, sweetheart," Dad said as Sophie leaned over her candles. She squeezed her eyes shut, took a deep breath, and blew out all 7 candles in one try. When she opened her eyes, she was grinning from ear to ear. "What did you wish for?" I asked. "I can't tell you or it won't come true." "But it already kind of came true anyway." "What do you mean?" "I wished for my family to all be together, but you're already here, so I guess I got my wish early." That night, after the party guests had gone home and Sophie had finally crashed from her sugar high, Dad and I sat on Lily's front porch watching the stars come out over Portland. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked. "The way everything happened? The years of secrecy and complications?" Dad was quiet for a long time, considering his answer. "I regret the pain it caused you when you found out. I regret that Sophie spent her early years wondering why she couldn't meet her sister. I regret that your mother didn't get to see how this all worked out." "But do you regret having Sophie?" "Never. Not for a single second. And I don't regret that you found out, even though it happened in the worst possible way. This, what we have now, this is what your mother hoped for from the beginning. What we have now was messy and unconventional
and sometimes confusing. Sophie split her time between Lily's house and Dad's new place. I had dinner with them several nights a week, but maintained my own apartment and independence. Lily and Dad co-parented with the careful respect of people who cared deeply about each other but had never been romantic. It wasn't a traditional family structure, but it worked. Sophie had 2 parents who were completely devoted to her, plus a big sister who taught her about college life and helped with homework. Dad had both his daughters in the same city, able to be present for school plays and science fairs and ordinary Tuesday night dinners. I had a sister who thought I hung the moon, and a father who no longer had to divide his attention between secret lives. A year later, Sophie's 2nd grade class had a family tree project. She brought home a large piece of poster board and asked for help organizing all her family relationships. "It's complicated," she said matter-of-factly, spreading out photos of everyone she considered family. "Mrs. Anderson says most family trees are just parents and grandparents and maybe some aunts and uncles, but mine has lots more people." She arranged photos of Dad and Lily at the top, then placed herself in the center with lines connecting to both parents. She added me as her sister, then included Lily's parents as grandparents and my maternal grandparents too, even though they'd died when I was young. "What about Mom?" I asked, pointing to an empty space on the poster. "Which mom?" "My mom. Your dad's first wife. She's part of your family tree too, even though you never met her." Sophie considered this seriously, then placed Mom's photo near the top of the tree. "She's like the roots," Sophie decided. "She's the part of the family tree you can't see, but she's what made everything else grow." I helped her write, "Catherine Chen, Mia's mom who loved Sophie even before they met," under the photo. When Sophie presented her family tree to the class, she explained it with the confidence of a child who'd grown up understanding that families could look different and still be real. Some families live in the same house, some families live in different houses but in the same city, and some families take a long time to figure out how to be together, but they get there eventually. After the presentation, several other children approached Sophie to talk about their own non-traditional family structures: divorced parents, step-siblings, adoptions, grandparents as primary caregivers. Sophie's matter-of-fact acceptance of family complexity had given other kids permission to talk about their own complicated situations. That evening, as Sophie showed us her family tree project and recounted her presentation, I realized something important had happened. We weren't just a family that had overcome secrets and distance. We were a family that had created space for complexity, for multiple forms of love, for relationships that didn't fit traditional categories, but were no less real or meaningful. 2 years later, I graduated from college with both Dad and Sophie in the audience cheering embarrassingly loudly when my name was called. Lily documented the entire ceremony with her professional photographer's eye, creating a record of the day that captured not just the milestone, but the joy of a family celebrating together. After the ceremony, Sophie ran up to me, still wearing the "My sister is a graduate" button she'd insisted on making. "I'm so proud of you," she said, wrapping her arms around my waist. "When I graduate from college, will you come cheer for me too?" "I'll be in the front row." "Even if you live somewhere else by then?" "Even if I live on the moon, I'll find a way to be there." That night, at the celebration dinner Lily had organized at Sophie's favorite restaurant, I looked around the table at the people who'd become my family through circumstances none of us could have predicted. Dad looking prouder than I'd ever seen him, Lily, who had become the sister I'd never expected to have, Sophie, who had taught all of us that love doesn't require traditional structures to be real or meaningful. "Thank you," I said, raising my glass of sparkling cider to match Sophie's. "For what?" Dad asked. "For being brave enough to make complicated choices. For loving each other even when it was hard to figure out how. For being the kind of family that grows instead of breaks when faced with impossible situations." Sophie raised her glass too, even though she was too young to really understand the toast. "To families that take forever to figure out how to be together," she declared. "To families that are worth the wait," Dad added. "To families that prove love is bigger than traditional definitions," Lily said. "To us," I said simply. We clinked our glasses together, 4 people who'd found each other through secrets and lies and painful truths,
but who'd chosen to build something beautiful and lasting from the complicated circumstances that had brought us to each other together. Outside the restaurant, Portland glittered in the distance, the city that had become home to our unconventional family. Tomorrow there would be new challenges, new decisions to navigate, new ways to grow into the people we were becoming together. But tonight, there was just us. Dad and his 2 daughters and the woman who'd helped make our family possible. Messy, complicated, unconventional, and absolutely perfect in all the ways that mattered. Sophie fell asleep in the car on the way home, her head on my shoulder, one small hand still clutching the button that declared her pride in having a sister. In the front seat, Dad and Lily discussed plans for the weekend, their co-parenting relationship as comfortable and natural as if they'd been doing it forever. This was what family looked like for us. Not the traditional structure I'd grown up assuming was the only valid option, but something more flexible, more inclusive, more willing to bend without breaking. I closed my eyes and listened to the quiet conversations of my family, Sophie's steady breathing, the familiar sounds of people who loved each other figuring out the logistics of their shared life. A year ago, I was a young woman who thought her family consisted of just her and her father, living in the shadow of her mother's death and trying to figure out how to build a future from the pieces of their past. Now I was part of something bigger, more complex, more challenging, and infinitely more rewarding. I was a sister, a daughter, a friend, and a member of a family that was built through intention rather than accident, through choice rather than just biology. The wallet photos that had started this entire journey were now part of a much larger collection. Pictures of all of us together, Sophie's school events with her entire family in attendance, holiday celebrations that included everyone who mattered. But more than the photos, more than the shared meals and family traditions we were still creating, was the understanding that family isn't just about who you're born to or who raises you. It's about who shows up, who stays, who chooses to love you even when the circumstances are complicated and the path forward isn't clear. Looking back, I could see that Dad's choices were imperfect, sometimes selfish, often misguided, but they had been motivated by love, by the desire to give Sophie the father she deserved, while protecting me from complications he thought I couldn't handle. He was wrong about what I could handle, wrong about the necessity of secrecy, wrong about the sustainability of living a double life. But he was right about one thing. Love doesn't have limits. It doesn't require traditional structures or conventional arrangements. It just requires people willing to show up for each other, to figure out the hard parts together, to choose each other again and again, even when it's complicated. As we pulled into Lily's driveway, I looked at the house that had become one of my homes, at the people who had become my family, and at the life I'd built in a city I never planned to live in. Sophie stirred